Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Maisha Hutton, and I am the Executive Director of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. I am delighted to be moderating this webinar, Obesity and Cancer, a Looming Public Health Concern for the Caribbean region. The webinar is being hosted by the Belize Cancer Society in partnership with the World Obesity Federation and the HCC. Obesity and non-communicable diseases, including cancer, are a major public health challenge for our small developing states in the Caribbean, posing a constant and growing threat to human development and security in our region. As we've seen across the globe in the past year, the pandemic has exposed the complexity of obesity, NCDs, and nutrition, and raised fundamental questions around the priority of the public health agenda and how we arrived in this place where the burden of NCDs is so unacceptably high, and in some of our countries where 3/4 of adults and 1/3 of children are overweight or obese. The pandemic has also forced us to consider how we begin to rebuild broken food systems, which are inherently designed for the mass production and delivery of processed and ultra-processed products which are fueling these epidemics. And how do we move towards healthy, resilient food systems, which ensure access to affordable, nutritious food sources for all, especially the vulnerable? Over the course of this webinar, we will answer some of these questions. We will learn about the causes and consequences of obesity and linkages to cancer. We will discuss factors contributing to obesogenic environments in the Caribbean and connections to regional food insecurity, made more acute by COVID-19. We will hear perspectives from young people and civil society advocates. And finally, we will explore the kinds of healthy food policy which will contribute to a reshaping of the regional food environment to support healthy diets for all. We have 5 terrific panelists who will be sharing their experiences and expertise. But before we hear from them, let me go over some quick housekeeping. The webinar will be recorded. The recording, slides, and certificates of attendance will be circulated post the webinar. And please feel free to use the Q&A function for comments and questions. So let's get into it. The first presenter is Dr. Mark Gunter. He is the head of Nutrition and Metabolism Branch at the International Agency for Research on Cancer at the World Health Organization. And Dr. Gunter will be speaking on obesity causation, risk factors, at-risk populations, and linkages to NCDs and cancer. The floor is yours. Over to you, Dr. Gunter.
Okay, thanks very much, Maisha, and thank you to the organisers for inviting me to this very interesting and very important discussion. So I'm going to be talking about, or giving a very short overview of the scientific evidence linking obesity with cancer, talking a bit about the epidemiology, the impact of obesity on cancer incidence, with a particular emphasis on the Caribbean region. I'll give a very brief overview of what we understand around the biology linking obesity and cancer, and then some important unanswered questions I think are very important for research and public health perspectives. So next slide. So just to give some context, I mean, I think we're all very much aware that obesity is becoming more prevalent worldwide. And there is an ongoing obesity epidemic, which is really touching every part of the world. So this is some data from the NCD risk factor collaboration, which collected data on body mass index from virtually every country of the world. And this is data from 2016. And what you can see here is where there's more red shading is where there's a higher proportion of people with a BMI above 30. And as you can see, there are many regions of the world, particularly North Africa, the Middle East, North America, but also increasingly parts of Europe, Latin America, Russia, and Australia, where obesity is reaching quite substantial proportions of the population. So in women, for example, in the Caribbean region, as you can see here, quite a substantial portion of women have a BMI above 25 to 30, which really represents a large portion of the population who are exposed to obesity. Next slide. With men, the situation is a bit different. Obesity is a bit less prevalent among men, particularly in countries in Africa and Asia, where there's still more of a less sedentary lifestyle. But if you look, for example, in North America, Europe, the Middle East, and again Australia, the prevalence of obesity again is quite high and is climbing. And if you go to the next slide, where we kind of zoom in on the Caribbean region, again you can see, in contrast to women, the prevalence of obesity among men is lower. But what we know is that the rates of obesity among men are starting to grow in this region as well. So this is becoming more of a problem in the Caribbean region. Next slide. So the link between obesity and cancer, there's been some understanding of this relationship for some time now. I think probably around 20, 30 years ago, some of the earliest epidemiologic studies were published showing that people who have developed certain cancers tended to be more overweight or obese compared to non-cancer patients. But it's really in the last 10 years that we've had some really high quality epidemiologic studies which support a direct relationship between obesity and various cancers. And this is supported by mechanistic and experimental data, which I'll go into in a moment. Back in 2016 here at IARC, we commissioned a report examining all the world's literature on obesity and cancer, both the epidemiologic literature, the data from animal models, as well as experimental data. And we assembled a group of experts to really make some kind of judgments on the strength of the evidence linking obesity with different cancers. And the summaries here, and actually the report is available for free on the IARC website, and I'm happy to share that link afterwards. But the summary was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine, and what you can see in this table is that there was sufficiently strong evidence for a causal link between obesity and 13 different cancers. These include esophageal cancer, gastric cancer, colorectal, liver, gallbladder, pancreatic, breast cancer among postmenopausal women, corpus uteri or endometrial cancer, ovarian, kidney, meningioma, thyroid, and multiple myeloma. And then for 3 other cancers, so mild breast cancer, fatal prostate cancer, and diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, there was limited but suggestive evidence for a link, whereas for the other cancers which were evaluated at the bottom, we really had inadequate evidence at that time. For the sufficient evidence, you can see that although we judged that there was very strong evidence for a link between obesity and these cancers, the strength of the association varies quite markedly. So on the right-hand side, we have the relative risks for the highest BMI category versus a normal BMI category. You can see for some cancers, for example, corpus uteri, there's a very strong association. So 7-fold higher risk for obese women versus lean women for this cancer. And at the top, esophageal adenocarcinoma, almost a 5-fold higher risk of developing this cancer. But if you look at some of the other tumor types, so colorectal cancer, postmenopausal breast cancer, the association is much weaker. But I think what's important here is that these are very common cancers. So given that obesity is becoming more common and these are common tumors, the actual number of cancers worldwide which could be attributable to obesity is actually quite high and is growing. So next slide. So trying to understand the mechanisms linking obesity with cancer, this is a really very active field of research at the moment, and we don't understand this fully. What we do know is that within obesity, we have this kind of physiological state, which is characterized by high levels of estrogen, insulin resistance, and inflammation, which is really caused by dysfunctional adipose tissue. So the adipose tissue which accumulates in obesity really has these quite profound metabolic and hormonal effects. And we think it's this kind of metabolic state, which often is caused by obesity, is really the link with cancer. Next slide. So in this diagram, what we did here was really try to summarize the evidence linking obesity and cancer from a mechanistic perspective. So we know that in obesity, often people who are obese, they have high levels of insulin, and insulin itself can act as a growth factor, so causing cells to proliferate and to reduce apoptosis, and really acting as a very strong growth promoting signal. Also in insulin, we have upregulation of other factors such as insulin-like growth factors, which again promote cell growth. We have high levels of bioavailable estrogens, which themselves can act as mitogens or growth promoters. And then we also have this very pronounced inflammatory state, and we know that inflammation itself is a hallmark of the cancer process. So in summary, what we think is that in obesity, we have this kind of physiological state which allows cells which carry cancer-causing mutations to survive and to grow and to become and to clonally expand and to become a tumor. So this really represents our current understanding linking obesity and cancer from a mechanistic perspective, but I think there's still quite a lot to learn. Next slide. Now, how does this impact cancer in the Caribbean region? So this is data from IARC, from the Cancer Surveillance Unit, which collects data from virtually every country of the world and tracks cancer incidence rates and survival in different countries. So this is data from the Caribbean region for both men and women. So in men, you can see that in 2020, there were approximately 60,000 new cases of cancer. By far the most common cancer in men is prostate, followed by lung, colorectal, and then stomach, laryngeal, and then other cancers. If you look at the bottom panel in women, there were roughly 53,000 new cancer cases in the region in 2020, with by far the most common breast cancer, but closely followed by colorectal and then lung, colorectal cancer, cervical cancer, and then others. What's interesting here is that many of these cancers were the ones which were in the table I showed you that are linked to obesity. So for example, fatal prostate cancer, colorectal cancer, breast cancer, cancer of the corpus uteri. These all have very well established links with obesity. And because obesity is becoming more common, it's quite possible that the incidence of these particular cancers will become more common in the years to come. Next slide. We can already make some estimates of the number of cancers which might be caused by obesity in the Caribbean region. So this is data again from the IARC Cancer Surveillance Unit, where we try to estimate the number of cancers caused by obesity in the Latin American and Caribbean region together. So what we estimated was that it's quite likely that obesity was a cause for around 12,000 new breast cancers in the region, around 8,000 cases of corpus uteri cancer, around almost 7,000 colon cancer, roughly 5,000 gallbladder, same number of kidney, and then smaller number for pancreas. So this is really a big problem. So we know that obesity is a cause of these different cancers, and as I said, with the growing instance of obesity in the region, it could be a source of cancer cases for these different anatomical sites in the years to come. Next slide. So I think what can we do about this? Well, we know obesity is potentially preventable. So we know that genetics does play a role in obesity. We know that the inheritance of certain genes predisposes some people to becoming overweight and obese. But really, it's an interaction between genes and the environment, because even though you might be genetically predisposed to developing obesity, you really need to have the environmental kind of input as well for that to become manifest. This is data from the World Cancer Research Fund, which evaluated different risk factors for obesity, and which really concluded that there are a number of very well established now factors which can lead to obesity, predominantly consumption of sugar sweetened drinks, screen time, which is really a marker of sedentary behavior, so not being physically active enough, spending too much time in front of the TV or on the computer, and not moving enough. And then the consumption of more of a Western type diet, which is characterized by fast food, ultra processed food, and really a lack of whole foods. And we know that these sorts of things are becoming more predominant in many countries, including in the Caribbean region. On the flip side, we know that there are factors which are prevent obesity. So being physically active, we know that people who tend to walk more, they have a low risk of obesity. Those who engage in more aerobic physical activity, but then also importantly, consuming foods which are more contain more whole foods, fibers, more of a Mediterranean dietary pattern, which is characterized by consumption of high amounts of vegetables, very low amounts of meat and processed foods. And then also in women, having been breastfed is also an important risk factor for reducing, or important factor for reducing obesity into adulthood. So where possible, we really encourage women to breastfeed, because we know that that can impact upon obesity later in life. So although, as I said, although we know that genetics plays a role in obesity, it's these factors which really are the causes of obesity, and can be modified to prevent obesity throughout the life course. Next slide. So just to summarize what we know, so we know that obesity is a cause of at least 13 different types of cancer, many of which are becoming more common in the Caribbean region and worldwide. And this is potentially preventable. So if we can encourage people to avoid becoming obese, we can really encourage governments maybe to engage in implementing strategies to reduce obesity and to increase physical activity, in society, that would probably have quite a profound impact on cancer incidence in the region. From a scientific perspective, we don't fully understand why obesity causes cancer, but we have a very good idea that there are certain pathways involved, so certain hormones such as insulin, the immune system, sex hormones such as estrogen, but there are also emerging factors. So one really interesting area is around the microbiome. So the kind of the consortium of bacteria and viruses and fungi living within our bodies. We know that these also play a very important role now in maintaining our normal physiology. And we know that very often the gut microbiome, so the bacteria living in the gut, tends to be dysregulated in obesity. And this is potentially also a cause whereby diet and genetics the gut microbiota interact to influence obesity in people. So this is a really exciting area. There aren't many studies showing that intentional weight loss reduces risk of cancer. This is actually quite difficult to do. There are no clinical trials out there looking at the effects of intentional weight loss on cancer risk. They would be too expensive to conduct and would require millions of people to be involved. So that's very difficult to evaluate within clinical trials. But we do have data from prospective cohort studies which show that women and men who intentionally lose weight, they tend to have a lower risk of certain cancers, particularly cancers of the endometrium and colorectal cancer. We're also very much interested in trying to go beyond how we characterize obesity. So very often we use body mass index or waist circumference, and this is actually quite a poor measure of obesity. We know that there are perhaps lean people who have kind of metabolic obesity that wouldn't be characterized as being obese by just relying on BMI. So there's a lot of research now in trying to identify better biomarkers of obesity, which can take into consideration, for example, fat around our organs, as well as fat in different parts of our bodies, because BMI, particularly in men, is actually quite a poor marker of obesity. So we need to have better ways of measuring obesity and its metabolic impact. And then lastly, I want to make the point that we need research in other populations. So most of the research that's been done on obesity and nutrition and cancer is really being conducted in Europe and in the United States, and to some degree in Asia and Australia. There's very little research from Latin America, from Africa, and from the Caribbean region. So here at IARC, we're really trying to promote more research in these areas, particularly in low to middle income countries. And you go to the next slide, just to highlight some of the work that we're doing in these regions. So for example, we've established some studies on breast cancer in young women in Central America and in South America. So we're trying to identify causes of breast cancer in this population. And we have a number of ongoing studies on breast cancer in Africa. So in South Africa, we have a study in Soweto trying to identify risk factors for breast cancer in this population where they have very high rates of obesity and poor nutrition. And then in Morocco, we're doing some similar work on breast and colorectal cancer. So we're hoping with some of these studies, and there are many others ongoing around the world, we can try to have more robust scientific data from different parts of the world as well, where there might be specificities in diet and metabolic effects and genetics as well. So we can really try to understand the link between obesity and nutrition and cancer in these other parts of the world, including the Caribbean. So that's it. I'm happy to take some questions at the end.
Hi, Dr. Gunter. That was excellent. Wonderful presentation. I was very interested in seeing the data that you had for the Caribbean and seeing the strong linkage between cancer and diabetes. And obesity. It certainly will help us with our advocacy in pushing this agenda. I'm going to switch gears now and invite Danielle to speak. Danielle Walwyn is the Advocacy Officer at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, and she's also the coordinator of Healthy Caribbean Youth. Danielle?
Thank you, Maisha, and thanks to all the organizers for inviting me to present today. So I'm going to be looking at childhood obesity and what youth are doing to address this issue. Next slide, please. And so I wanted to start off with a staggering statistic. Next slide. 1 in 3 Caribbean children is living with overweight or obesity, one of the highest rates in the world. And so we have to ask ourselves why. And as Dr. Gunter mentioned, there are numerous reasons, but I'm just going to focus on kind of the major ones today. So we're talking about childhood obesity, we're talking about the food environment. And we know that there's limited access and lack of affordability of healthy foods in the region in general. But on the flip side, there's affordability of foods that are high in salt, sugar, and fat, which has resulted in an overconsumption of these foods. And we can't talk about the food environment and not talk about the pervasive marketing of unhealthy foods to children in and around schools in particular. And when we're talking about physical activity, there is a lack of accessibility to diverse, fun, and inclusive physical activity. And so it's difficult then for children to develop positive associations with physical activity. And of course, which I know Dr. Samuels is going to go over, the absence or weak implementation of policies that would protect health. And so this is the pre-COVID context, but there's no doubt that this has shifted into our current COVID pandemic. You can have the next slide, please. And one of the things that has been brought to our attention from pediatricians from across the region since the onset of the pandemic is a significant increase in weight gain among their patients. And so on World Obesity Day 2021, pediatricians from across the Caribbean region released a letter, an open letter to the people of the region, highlighting this concerning increase in weight gain, the fact that our children are moving less as a result of the new environment that they're navigating, and then that the fact that they've seen an increase in mental health concerns. And so these were the three major issues that they highlighted. And at the very end of that letter, next slide, please, they released some calls to action. And I say they because it was the pediatricians, but then we also had our Healthy Caribbean Coalition community behind that. So for example, governments really, again, prioritizing the need for strong policies to protect the health of children and young people. Private sector, halting targeted marketing of unhealthy products on digital platforms. And again, this is something we've seen a significant increase in the amount of digital, the marketing of unhealthy foods on digital platforms. And civil society, again, encouraging all of you to continue to protect nutrition policies and advocate for them. And there are additional calls to youth advocates, parents and guardians, and pediatricians and healthcare providers as well. So this is kind of where we are. This is our most recent call to action. And so if you were to ask me, in general, do youth view childhood obesity as a significant threat to their development? It's a yes and no answer. No, because as I mentioned before, there's the reality of the obesogenic environment that we're living in. And unfortunately, this has somehow become a norm. In addition, in the Caribbean, culturally, there's an affinity for larger body types. So that's something to consider. So there are a number of factors. But then on the flip side, I have to say that, yes, we do have a very strong youth voice advocating for childhood obesity prevention. And so I'm very excited for the rest of my presentation to give you an insight into what that has been looking like. So in terms of the HCC sphere, the Healthy Caribbean Coalition sphere, we in 2019 brought on Mr. Pierre Cook, who is the Youth Voices technical advisor, and he has been pushing passionately for childhood obesity prevention on a local, regional, and international level. And for him, he's passionate about many things, but one in particular is the right to health and a children's right to health. And again, bring light to that pervasive marketing that we've been seeing of unhealthy foods to children. And I could somehow say that Pierre, his work inspired the creation of Healthy Caribbean Youth, which is the Healthy Caribbean Coalition's youth arm that was formed in 2020. And again, this is a combination of youth and young professionals focused on and passionate about the prevention and control of NCDs. Our members are coming from diverse backgrounds, including mental health, education, nutrition, all focused on and passionate about advocating for childhood obesity and NCD prevention and control. And although we're in our infancy, so far we've done some work really advocating for healthy school environments, as well as strong policy environments. And we've also done quite a bit of work with mental health as well. And so as a collective, we're pretty strong, but I have to highlight the fact that individually, our Healthy Caribbean Youth members are doing some pretty phenomenal work. I'm just highlighting two here, Mr. Kern Rock. He is looking at walkability and NCDs in Barbados with his research. And Stephanie Whiteman is assessing the foodscape in Barbados. So again, they're doing some pretty phenomenal work. Next slide, please. And I cannot talk about childhood obesity prevention and youth advocacy without mentioning the Barbados Childhood Obesity Prevention Youth Subcommittee. They are doing some phenomenal work in Barbados. Again, you can see a list of the policies that they continue to advocate for, but the youth committee in particular has done quite a bit of outreach work when we could in person, focusing on healthy school environments, healthy living for the school age population. And since the pandemic, where we've been limited, not even really limited, but we've had to really look at the use of digital platforms, they have taken their advocacy work on to our social media platforms. And they have had some very, very strong campaigns, again, calling on policymakers to really make a change in terms of implementing nutrition policies and healthy school environments related policies. And one of their big wins last year was that Barbados was working on a school nutrition policy. They realized that youth were not involved in the conversation. They pushed for this, and they were able to have a youth advocate present in the meetings going forward. And so they were able to, as a youth advocate, offer their perspective and also encourage all the stakeholders to truly and meaningfully engage youth moving forward. So again, huge kudos to the Barbados Childhood Obesity Prevention Youth Subcommittee. And finally, I think you can say, probably just from the little insight that I gave you, that youth, we're doing our part. We recognize that this is something, especially related to childhood obesity, that will affect us and future generations. But as noted in that letter to the region, this needs a whole of society approach. We need public, private, civil society organizations to really come together. And so as you come together, engage youth meaningfully in that, and engage persons who have lived experiences as well in that. And so I'll end with Mr. Pierre Cook's, one of his many popular sayings is, nothing can be done for the youth without the youth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle. Excellent presentation, really underscoring the need to engage young people in this fight against obesity and creating healthy food systems for their future. Now I'm going to invite Mr. David Nealance to speak. David Nealance is a former British Foreign Service officer. He worked as a senior executive in food retail in the region for many, many years. He served as a longstanding member of the Barbados NCD Commission, and he sits on various boards right now, including the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados. David has a gift of gab, and he has such tremendous insider experience in regional food systems. I'm really keen to hear him speak now on combating obesity through food security interventions. David, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Why are we here? I don't mean today, I mean at all. Indian philosophy speaks to the characteristics of living things, rhythm, if you will. Move, feed, breed, grow, and react to stimuli. Socrates told us an unexamined life is not worth living. So let's go. Move. People to the Caribbean, people from the Caribbean, people moving from the time we left the cave. Fertile land by rivers and hills by the sea. Move for what? Grow food? Use people as tools? Build empires, east, west, north, and south, to control. North America moved the native Indian from his land, and today, the first Red Indian to become a Minister of the Environment in the USA is sworn in. In the Caribbean, too many people, not enough land. 25 million hectares of, and only 871,000 hectares of arable land. Small farmers in the main, of which 80% less than 2 hectares. Movement of people from Africa and Asia and from Europe. Movement of food from the Caribbean, leaving as a brown commodity and coming back as a white sugar. Movement of the sea and the wind, erosion of the soil, physical damage from flood and hurricane, loss of nutrients in the ground. Movement of food, linked to the movement of tourists, expanded food bills, need for foreign exchange, taste buds, habits change with tourism, rise of unhealthy fast foods, convenience on the move, and as Danielle related, unstructured eating for the youth. We need energy and we have to feed better. Feed. We import 90% of what we eat. We attempt to export fruit and vegetables as raw materials and then import them back as processed food. Listen to Judith Francis from IECA in 2001. The strength and success of a country or a region's agriculture depends on its ability to satisfy domestic, regional, and international market demand for selected fresh, semi-processed, or finished agricultural commodities on a consistent and timely basis at competitive prices. The Caribbean region has traditionally been a net importer of processed foods and an exporter of raw agricultural products. That was in 2001. Little has changed. We're still not producing enough of the kind of foods that we need to eat. The private sector is mainly an importer rather than a producer. Now that supply is difficult, suddenly there's a recognition that big must work with small. Caribbean private sector organizations are being encouraged by government to understand how we can reduce the food bill by 25% the year 2025. But what is the replacement? How do we ensure that what we eat is nutritious going forward? How do we link the farmer to the food? Can we expand on the growth of foods such as cassava, protein-rich sweet potato and yam, new healthy products that we eat here first and export later? Cooperatives growing and linking with food processors to create healthy convenience product which has taste, and a taste that we have been weaned on. Breathe. Are you breathless yet? You should be. We pollute our air. Wind carries sand from the Sahara. Our crops suffer from lack of nutrients. We suffer from asthma, allergies. We don't exercise enough. We have NCDs. Now we have COVID. We can't breathe. It's time to find our breath, to build back better, to grow. Grow. Go up but not out. Grow up healthy and articulate. We have fed ourselves the wrong foods, and many of us cannot afford to eat what we grow and grow what we eat. We have the capacity to change, reformulate our food, work together. Do we understand that everybody needs everybody? React to stimuli. What more information do we need? Yes, we can build back better. We are here today from all over the world with a common problem. 10% of the world's countries cannot reach the WHO's reduction in WHO's reduction in obesity by 2025, or so that's what we understand. The target was no increase between 210 and 225. The target is 25% reduction in premature deaths by 2025. World Obesity Federation is identifying obesity as a major cause of the problem. And they've gone back to roots. We've got to recognize there is obesity and really recognize it. We've got to obesity monitor. We've got to obesity prevent. We've got to treat. We've got to use systems-based approaches. What more stimulus do we need? We have the science, we have the skills, we have the technology. Working together with passion, let us understand the stimuli of our children growing up in a world to move better, to feed better, to breathe better, to grow better, and to react to stimuli. This conversation this morning is about stimuli. It's about discussion. It's about everything that we've all said already, and we'll say again later. We've got to act together. So the motivation behind the words is real. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And let's move on to Heather. I have known Heather Renault since 2013. She's one of my absolute favorite people. She is a wonderful person, and she's been working with the Belize Cancer Society as a senior administrator for over a decade. Heather is going to share the Belize context. Heather, go ahead.
Thank you kindly, Maisha, for that very warm introduction. I will be sharing the Belize context as it appears to obesity. Next slide. In Belize, obesity is a serious problem like many other Caribbean countries. And the WHO has stated in 2016 statistics that our children ages 5 to 9 had an obesity rate of 12.2 and an overweight rate of 28.5. So you know this is a seriously significant problem for us. The WHO 2016 diabetes profile also showed our overweight and obesity for our country. And obesity was considered a serious risk factor. That data showed that 45.4% of our female or males were obese and a rating of 55.5% of our female. Belize is one of the most obese countries in the Caribbean, as stated by the World Obesity Federation statistics. 8 out of 10 of our adults are considered overweight or obese, with a national obesity rate of 33.8% and overweight rate of 32.5%. Some of our leading cancers that we've been seeing in Belize is breast cancers, prostate cancers, colon cancers, and stomach cancers. And these has been as a result of, we would say, obesity. According to our latest WHO data, this was published in 2018, breast cancers continue to be one of the leading cause of death for our country, reaching 0.88% of our total deaths. Colon cancers reach 1.26% of our total deaths. And stomach cancer reached 0.99% of our total deaths, while prostate cancer in Belize reached to 2.8% of total deaths. The BHIS system also showed that we had an increase in obesity of almost 200%. And we also had an alarming fact that this increase was also between ages 10 years to 65 years old. It also showed that we had 100% in mortality rates, where we had the number of persons considered obese from 164 persons to 244 persons. And all of these persons died were 65 age plus. Next slide. So we know we have a problem. And as a Caribbean, we need to address this issue, and we need to highlight this as a significant concern. The World Health Organization continues to advise that we need to take multi-sectoral approach, especially Belize and other small Central American countries. We need to adopt policies and strategies to effectively address these right now. Next slide. Some of the strategies that we are using to address the increase in obesity and cancer in Belize and the wider Caribbean, as you have heard my colleagues say, and you will hear after with the recommendations by Professor Samuels, that policy and legislation is key in addressing the bans on unhealthy foods and drinks in our country. We need to increase our consumer and nutrition education. We need to advocate for efforts for front of package labeling. This is one such initiative that we're increasing our education reach and highlighting obesity as a significant issue, especially for us here in Belize, as we've lost recently a young person to obesity. We need to have easily accessible and affordable fruits and vegetables, as you heard David spoke about just now. We need these subsidized that persons that are very vulnerable and impoverished are able to access these foods. We need to ensure that we have some level of food security and healthy foods for our children and our adults of all ages. We also need to make sure that we make an individual step to adapt healthier lifestyle changes with diet and exercise. Next slide. So in summing this up, we need to make this collective effort locally, regionally, and internationally to prioritize the issue of obesity and mortalities caused by cancer and other NCDs for the benefit of ourselves and for our children. In closing off my presentation, I'd like to applaud the Healthy Caribbean Coalition as they're being the regional agencies in pulling everybody together, and as well the World Obesity Federation, which is the international agency coordinating this event. And I leave you with a word from our Caribbean people and a letter from our pediatricians launched by the HCC And we invite you to join this initiative and log on to the website and sign your name and represent your country. Thank you.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever, our children and our youth need us to step up.
Today, we as pediatricians from around the Caribbean region release an open letter to the people of the Caribbean.
Right now, our region's children and youth are facing a crisis.
The COVID-19 pandemic has turned their worlds upside down, and this has affected their physical health and mental well-being dramatically.
Children are moving less during the school day and eating more as a result of an unstructured eating schedule and overconsumption of empty calories.
As a result, we have observed a very concerning increase in weight gain among our patients.
Mental health continues to be a silent crisis, and our patients and children are suffering. Our patients are experiencing anxiety and depression.
Our children and youth need us to step up.
We are calling on public, private, civil society organizations, and parents and guardians
to come together and do their part in helping create healthy environments by
making healthy foods accessible,
creating opportunities and providing resources to stay active despite the lockdown,
and normalizing and destigmatizing mental health.
The situation is urgent.
Now, more than ever,
we need to step up.
Our children and youth need us to step up. Now more than
Thank you, Heather, for your remarks and really setting the scene and underscoring the urgency for us to take action. Now I'd like to present Professor Alafia Samuels. Professor Samuels is the honorary professor at the Caribbean Institute for Research, Health Research, or CAHIR, based in Jamaica at the University of the West Indies. Professor Samuels is a thought leader in this region in the area of obesity and NCDs, and has been working to advance and accelerate NCD policy and nutrition policy for many years. She also sits on a number of global and regional boards. Professor Samuels, over to you.
Hi, Maisha. Good morning. Thank you and welcome, everyone. Today, I'm going to be presenting, can I have the next slide, on the obesity and its impact, and what are the potential policies that we can introduce that will make a difference. So, as has been said by previous speakers, not only is obesity in general and more troubling, childhood obesity, very high, but the issue is that it is increasing and increasing at a very rapid rate. So this slide is showing you the trends in obesity in childhood in 4 areas of small island developing states. These are actually Commonwealth countries, but it's most of the small island developing countries are small island countries. And you can see the green, the Pacific is leading the way, but the Caribbean is right behind. And our rate of increase is increasing, so it's accelerating. So that's really a huge problem. Next slide. The reason for this has to do with the fact that we have changed our eating patterns. Previously, our grandparents ate green stuff in the green column, right? So minimally processed, fresh, frozen foods, fresh fruits and vegetables, and so on. This has now transitioned to the red line, where the majority of our youth in particular and the population in general is eating ultra-processed foods, which are high in salt, sugar, and fat, the chips, the burgers, the hot dogs, etc. Next, please. And once upon a time, we got our food from the farmer and the market, but now a lot of countries get their food from these 8 or 10 large companies, which control hundreds of companies, and their stakeholders, their shareholders, are interested in the bottom line. What is the profit we're going to bring, and how can we sell the cheapest food to make the most profit? And the way you do that is by adding a lot of these elements and chemicals which are actually harmful to our health. Next. So this is connected to the concept of the commercial determinants of health. So the commercial determinants of health really are these occur when you have multinational food and beverage companies that promote overconsumption. Promote overconsumption. They claim that you're in the marketplace, you're free to, it's a free country, their product is out there, but they are promoting the overconsumption. What do I mean? Supersize. You get double the amount for a small increase in money. That's what we mean by promoting overconsumption. And the foods are highly processed, unhealthy, and sugary. And like tobacco, marketing is shifting from high-income countries to developing countries, including in the Caribbean. Next. And why do we say that the more ultra-processed foods you eat, the more obese you are? Well, the evidence is clear. If you look at this chart, you can see that in the countries where they have, let's look at Colombia. Colombia has maybe 20% of ultra-processed foods, and their obesity rate is around 15%. Then you go to Mexico, UK, Canada, right? They are having 70% of their foods coming from those 10 large companies and others, ultra-processed foods, and their obesity rates are 25%. So it's clear the connection between ultra-processed foods and obesity. Next. And the result of all that is that we are having an epidemic of premature mortality from non-communicable diseases in the region. This is Jamaica, but this pattern is similar elsewhere, where about 80%, both in males and females, of premature mortality are due to non-communicable diseases. So people are dying between 30 and 69 years because of unhealthy diets and non-communicable diseases which arise from that. Next. So where do we act for change? There are two levels at which we can act. There's the individual level, and then there's a population or policy level. At the individual level, we can do health education, support individual decisions, but we need to understand that the individuals operate in a society where the drivers of unhealthy eating are structural. We talked earlier about the issue of supersize and how that is priced, the very availability of healthy food, the price, and so on. So the individual level has good potential, but we also need to recognize the limitations of just taking an individual approach. The more effective approach is a policy level approach. We recognize that there's a new food culture. We talked about the commercial determinants of health and the fact that these are generating obesogenic environments. Therefore, we need policy strategies at the organizational, community, or population level to be powerful, sustainable, scalable, and achieve broad impact. Next. So in the Caribbean, we have had quite an important history with regards to at least our ambitions in NCD. In 2007, the CARICOM heads of government had the first ever meeting of heads of governments looking at NCDs. And Sir George Alene was one of the drivers of getting this meeting to happen. And it was happening because it was recognized that the drivers of NCDs are all of society and all of government drivers. And so you need heads of government to deal with that. Next. So the Port of Spain Summit Declaration had 15 mandates: national, multi-sectoral NCD commissions, risk factor reduction, healthcare, quality coverage, surveillance, Caribbean wellness day, etc. And the University of the West Indies led the formal evaluation of the Port of Spain Declaration. Next. Out of the reporting of this evaluation, which was presented back to the heads of government in 2016, the heads of government reflected on the evaluation, acknowledged that progress was variable, and agreed to adopt a more holistic approach. So they again pledged specifically to ban smoking in public places, address trade-related issues, and this is the important one, banning advertisement of potentially harmful foods which specifically target children, and also elevating taxes on foods high in sugar, salts, and fat. So the heads of government have sort of set out the framework and the policy mandates for us. Let's see how well we have been doing. I just put this slide in here so you could get the URL. It is a report of the evaluation that was delivered to the heads of government in September 2018. And later on, you can go and look at that. I don't think we have time to show it now. Next. So what are the kinds of policies that we need to be engaging in terms of obesity? So let's talk about reducing sugar consumption. Now, I should just point out, can you reverse that, please? I should just point out that the photograph you see is a photograph which shows graphically the amount of sugar in each of these products. And every time we show this, people are shocked. Because, for example, if you look in the middle at the Pine Hill fruit punch, which people will often choose because it says fruit and you figure it's fruit, it's good. Yeah, well, I don't know how much fruit is in it, but that's the amount of sugar that's in it that you can see on the right-hand side. And people can't believe that almost half of that product is just sugar. Of course, Coke, people are well aware. Did you know that tuna fish has sugar in it? They put sugar in everything. Next. So sugar is in everything, yes, but we are focusing, and there has been a general focus on taxing sugar in drinks. And people have often asked, well, why are you targeting sugar in drinks? These are the reasons. Calories from simple sugars added to drinks do not satisfy hunger. There's no feeling of fullness. So you waste those calories. Sugars in sugar-sweetened beverages have no nutrients, so they are empty calories. Sugar in drinks are absorbed extremely rapidly, causing a spike in blood sugar and in insulin, and actually leading to, I think it's a 18% increase in diabetes prevalence for every soda that you drink, if you drink, for each soda day that you drink. So they are dangerous calories. So we focus on sugar in drinks because those calories are wasted, they're empty, and they're dangerous. Next. I put this again, this is a video, and it is the sugar sweetened beverage advocacy in Jamaica, which was an ad campaign funded by Bloomberg's philanthropies, and you can see the link there. You can watch it. It's an excellent video. There was quite a significant program in Jamaica. There are no taxes on sugar sweetened beverages in Jamaica, but there was this big program, and they in fact have shown impact from the program. But of course, this is Bloomberg type money. And those of us who don't have Bloomberg type money, then this is not an option. Next. In Trinidad and Tobago, no taxes, but they have banned the sale of sugar sweetened beverages in schools. One parent said, "Minister, you're giving our children prison food." And the minister replied, "Better prison food now than hospital food later." So the minister has stuck to his guns, and they have banned the sale of sugar sweetened beverages in schools. The problem I think they're going to run into is that they have not banned the children bringing sugar sweetened beverages to school. So you can bring it in your backpack, you just can't purchase it in the school. So we really need a whole wraparound policy on that. Next. Okay, so a lot of countries have therefore, in addition to these other potential actions, have gone the population policy route of actually taxing sugar sweetened beverages. And here you see a list of countries in the world that have sugar sweetened beverage taxations. And on the right-hand side, not the left, sorry, in the Americas, you can see Bermuda, Dominica, Barbados, and they should have also added St. Vincent, who has a tax on sugar. Next slide. So in Mexico, they have high obesity, high diabetes, high consumption of sugary drinks. They introduced a 10% tax on sugar sweetened beverages, and the effect was a 6% reduction in consumption of all SSBs. So what you do is that you project what the consumption was expected to be, and then you look at what actually occurred in terms of consumption, and you see the difference between those two, and that is how they get to calculate the reduction. Next. In Mexico, they had a really excellent program because they not only raised the tax, which they passed through, but they also had a mass media event. And they had messages like, would you drink 12 teaspoons of sugar? Soda is sweet, diabetes isn't. Next. They had demonstrations. They went to the graveyard. I mean, these people are next level. They had demonstrations in the graveyard to say, the people in here died prematurely because of too much consumption of unhealthy food. They're still pushing for the 20% tax and spend some of the tax money on water fountains for schools. Next. As I mentioned before, in the Caribbean, Barbados and Dominica have taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages. Bermuda and St. Vincent tax sugar. So even Bermuda has tax on chocolate. Trinidad and Tobago banned the sales, and Jamaica had the ad campaigns. Next. So this is what I was telling you about before. Bermuda is 75% tax on sugar. 75%. You can imagine how the private sector howled about that. The government has stood firm and they have not backed down. The impact of that has been that between 2014 and 2019, overall consumption declined from 50% to 42%, and the greatest decline was among men, 59% to 36%. There are more sugar-free options on the market. And this is an important point. The public discussion on the sugar tax raised awareness about the harms of sugar and has helped to educate the general public. Also, not coincidentally, they did collect $5 million from this tax. And when you look at the Bermuda population, that actually works out to $85 per person per year. So just consider that money being, a down payment on the payment for your next heart attack. Next. Barbados implemented the tax on sugar. On the shelf, you actually see the difference, $5.70 versus $6.10. Next. And the Barbados also, we did a formal evaluation, and the results are that sugar-sweetened beverage consumption went down and water sales went up. Next. So there was almost 6% of the 10% was passed on to consumers, which was resulted in a decrease of 4% in sugar-sweetened beverages and 7% increase in water sales of 7%. So I remember having a discussion on a radio program with one of the manufacturers, the agent for Coca-Cola in Jamaica. And he was complaining about the fact that, they want to, saying bad things about sugar-sweetened beverages and blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, but sir, your sales of water have gone up. So what's the problem? So there was no answer to that, because from the manufacturer's point of view, they tried to throw a lot of things about, these taxes are going to cause all of these disruptions in industry and employment is going to be disrupted, and none of that has been shown evident by the facts. Next. So the soda tax is not a silver bullet. Taxation is one of many instruments that are available to promote healthier diets and should be seen as part of a package. Next. So the other thing that we have been doing is supporting regional organizations in policy creation and implementation. Some of the actions that University of West Indies has been doing over the past couple of years includes curriculum revision for primary and secondary schools, working with CXC, and also that's for the secondary schools and CXC subjects, 2 subjects, and working with the CARICOM Secretariat to revise the health and family life education curricula, which was that revision was approved in October. The issue is that a lot of our teaching in primary and secondary schools are really based on one, sanitation from back in the day, wash your hands, et cetera, and then two, reproductive health and HIV. And so there has been to date no significant input about NCDs, their drivers and risk factors in the curricula. And so this was to correct that. Next. Front of package labeling. Let's talk about front of package labeling. So we have been supporting CrossQ, which is a Caribbean regional organization for standards and quality, in leading this front of package labeling initiative. We are recommending regional standards the same as Chile. I'll show them to you in a bit. The countries now are responding. There has been vigorous opposition from industry, as you can imagine. But we also need to accept that there may be some challenges in small island states that are not such a problem in larger countries, right? So St. Kitts imports 95% of what it eats. So the logistics of adding the labels to these products once they get to St. Kitts, different labels for different products, etc., we have to acknowledge that that is a little bit of a challenge. Next. So now regionally, there is this campaign by PAHO, HCC, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, and UNICEF promoting warning labels, because the regional standard has not yet been adopted. And even after the regional standard, and it's not a standard really, it's a recommendation. Because what happens is that then it goes to countries, and it is at country level, each country level, that it has to be implemented. So it's a kind of a two-stage process in small islands such as this. This campaign is, very vigorous, and we're saying, we need warning labels, and we want the black hexagons. We don't want the other ones. Next slide will show, in fact, the evidence for the black hexagons, which is a PAHO study done with the University of Technology, which looked at the 4 different potential labels. And you see them on your screen there. The black hexagons, the sort of traffic light thing, the Canadian business with the microscope or whatever, searchlight thingy, and then some other nutrition packages. And it was clear that the black hexagons were the ones that performed best. So you have the evidence from PAHO, and then you have the resistance. The Jamaican Manufacturers Association talking about that they are concerned about implementation of front of package labeling, and they want to launch another study. Next. So finally, let me end by talking about Chile, because we said earlier that you need to have multiple interventions, whole of government, whole of society. There's no single bullet. Let's see what Chile has done. First of all, we need to acknowledge the leadership of the president, the former president of Chile, Michelle Bachelet. She is a pediatrician, so very concerned, obviously, about childhood obesity. And it's Chile, so of course she was a political prisoner and so on. She served two terms in government. And next. This was the program that they implemented. So at the top, you will see the black hexagon labels, but that's not all that they did. They did education, nutrition, and promotion of physical activity. They restricted the sale of any food that had a black label could not be sold in the schools. And they also, importantly, banned advertising of food high in certain ingredients were banned for the hours that children were watching television. Now, unfortunately, in the Caribbean, this last one is not an option for us, because most of the media that we consume is from North America. The cable and so on that comes in is either from North America or South America. So it's difficult to do that last one. But this is the entire wraparound program that they had, multiple interventions hitting different points. Next. So in terms of the label, the other thing that they did is that they had a kind of a sliding approach to the labels. So when they started in June 26, let's take sugars, right? Sugars, if you had to be below 22.5 per 100 grams to not get the high-end label. But by 2018, it had dropped to 15, and 2019, it drops to 10. So you see, they're phasing it in over time. It's not a one time, once and done thing. And you see the same thing with the other ingredients. They are being phased in gradually. Next. So what has been the impact of chili, the law on the labeling and marketing? The logos have been implemented. People understand the logos. They're using them when they buy food. The purchase of food products with logos has decreased. Industry has reformulated. And of course, the whole idea around the logos contributing to food and nutrition education. Next. So specifically, the volume of high-end beverages has decreased by 24%. And calories from high-end beverage decreased by 28%. This is impressive. And what I say to people who say, oh yes, but you're not showing that there's any weight loss. Even reducing your sugar without weight loss is a health benefit. Weight loss is a long-term perspective, and it has a lot of other stuff going on. But we know that sugar, added sugar, is dangerous. So interventions that reduce added sugar is a plus for the health sector and for the health of people, obviously. Next. The other interesting thing that they did in creating a new food environment is that Tony the Tiger had to go. So you see on the left, Kellogg's, Zucker, Ritas, okay, with Tony the Tiger. But because it has on 2 black labels, they cannot put Tony the Tiger on the box anymore. Same thing with the M&Ms. The little M&M people have disappeared because the 3 black labels are on it instead. So this is really significant, you know, for children and for marketing. Tony the Tiger is on there for a reason. Children relate to him, and then they ask mommy to buy that cereal. Without Tony the Tiger on it, because it has the black markings, then you have a different kind of environment and different choices are made. Next. So finally, the call to action. Drawing on the hard-earned lessons of tobacco, let us commit to do the following with regards to food, soda, and alcohol. Reversing the NCD pandemic will require strong regulations and legislation. Notice they are not talking about individual willpower. They're talking about policy interventions. Countries must be able to develop and implement sound policies, and we have guidelines from WHO without risk of interference from commercial interests. We need to not allow multinationals to engage in LCD policy development or formulation, and we should not accept money from these sectors. I want to say, though, that I think that has to be a little bit more nuanced than the way it has just been outlined. I think that they should not be at the table when you are designing what you want to do. But I think once you have clearly written what you want to do, then you can talk to industry, because industry is not all the same. There's a great variety in private sector food industry. There are people who are making profits from growing and selling healthy food. Those people are not our enemies. And so we can't take a one-size-fits-all to the food industry. We need to be very clear about who our partners are and what we can accept from them. We need to have transparent and robust conflict of interest policies, and NCD prevention policy should be independent, should be based on independent research, and should be evidence-based. I think that's my last slide, is it? Yes, so thank you all very much. We need food for change in the Caribbean, and we need to love our body and have unity in health. This is Cheapside Market in Barbados. It's beautiful. Just thought I'd give you that shot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Samuels. Fantastic presentation, comprehensive as always, providing the evidence that we need to justify the policies that we need. I will invite all of the panelists now to turn their cameras on for our Q&A. We have quite a few questions in the Q&A function, and I'm going to start with Mark. Carlos Silas here from Glasgow University has a question for you. I wonder whether you could comment further on how we generate more evidence from Latin American and Caribbean countries and what strategies are currently in place to fill these gaps. Is observatory data enough?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there is a lack of high quality observational studies in the region. And in particular, prospective studies where we have large numbers of people who are recruited and then followed for many years to identify causes of cancer in the population. So, I mean, in Europe, for example, we have the EPIC study, which is 500,000 Europeans who've been followed for 20 years now, and that's produced a lot of informative data on causes of cancer. And there's other examples, UK Biobank, there's many cohorts in the US, but we don't currently have that in the Caribbean region or in Latin America. I think there is some initiatives underway to try to establish more prospective studies in some Latin American countries, particularly Brazil. But I think generally there's a lack of, I mean, these things require funding. They require millions of dollars of funding. I mean, we coordinate the EPIC study from here, and I mean, it's probably cost maybe, I don't know, $20 million or more over the last 20 years to maintain this study. But it requires investment from governments to really generate data. I mean, I think we need, I think some of the data that we generate from European or American studies can be kind of extrapolated to the Caribbean context. I mean, I think you can learn from what we're discovering in our own studies, but I think there are many cultural nuances and specificities in the population there, genetic, environment, lifestyle, which we really need kind of hard data from that region to draw more firm conclusions. So I think having high quality observational data is a very good start. And then probably we need more implementation research, how to implement some of these strategies to reduce obesity in the population. So I would say those are the two main strategies. So I think that it requires money and investment and funding.
Okay, great. Thank you. That answers also Dr. Graves's questions, which are related to funding or barriers to research. I'm going to ask this question of Danielle. Some students have revealed to me that during the pandemic, they've been depressed. As a result, they've resorted to eating comfort foods to feel better. Sadly, they cannot play the sports that they love. How do we resolve this issue? And I know that the HCC and HCY have been doing quite a bit of work around mental health and diet. So what's your take on this, Danielle?
Thanks so much for the question. My first immediate reaction is I'm so glad that your students were able to come to you to discuss this. One thing that we highlighted in that letter to the region was this need for open spaces to talk about these concerns. So I'd say that's the first thing, and that we need to continue to create the spaces so that we can talk to youth, find out how they're feeling, and ask them, you know, how we think we need to deal with this. Because we might think that we have a particular strategy, but they know their lives best. They know their current context best. So talking to them about different coping mechanisms. But I think creating that space, firstly, to talk about those issues is very important.
Thanks, Danielle. We have a question here for David. Would you not recommend agriculture in the Caribbean from a food production stance? Should focus on domestic consumption and perhaps regional export? Growing what we eat and eating what we grow. Is there a lack of political will here?
Yes, I think there probably is. And I was at a meeting yesterday with new Chief Agricultural Officer for Barbados, who is a lady, the first woman to ever hold such a post. There are women in agriculture. We certainly are not feeding ourselves the kind of food regionally that we should be. We have long given up, or we've never actually started in a major way to try to feed ourselves with enhanced product When I say enhanced product, I mean using vegetables that we grow to turn them into products that we currently eat from supermarkets that we import. So before we need to import these raw materials, which is my reference to the lady in 2000, we have to go back a step. We have to try to work with farmers and food processors to regionally supply food to our own markets in an effort to reduce the importation of food, which is costing a fortune. As we've said already, Belize is 95%, we're 90 odd percent. You know, Bermuda is high. They're all high because we've been weaned on importation of foods because we haven't really produced. We've actually exported our raw materials like sugar, like bananas. We grow a lot of bananas, so we can afford to export bananas and still have local bananas. There was a time when all the bananas were leaving. Local consumption of bananas had fallen off because they weren't as available. Now, Alafia may tell me there's too much sugar in banana, so she might be correct in that instance. The fact is, yes, I believe we need to draw back inward a little bit and try to supply using food from the region, within the region, to each other. I think that is fundamental, this whole sense of, you know, working together. And that has to include the farmer, it has to include the Ministry of Agriculture. I mean, the Ministry of Agriculture here is trying to do a program to grow broccoli as opposed to import it. Not easy. It's a cool climate product. However, they're trying to do more with papaya, which failed in the past because of root disease and pest, which is also another huge problem. So we have numerous experts in the ministries of agriculture across the region. We have more scientists than farmers, I think. And therefore, there is a great capacity to bring these people together with the farmers, to do much more than we're doing. In the meeting yesterday, our farmers were saying, well, you know, food processing's all very well, but, you know, I don't know if I got the market for it. Lafayette and I met with a major regional processor earlier this week. He supplies hospitals in South America, 3 or 4 hospitals, a prison. They could supply schools. There really is an opportunity for the big processor to meet with the small farmer, the two to harness, the farmers to be representative, to have a financial interest perhaps, and therefore bring up that social end of our countries is not getting through. A lot of our problem, as we know, is that people can't afford a lot of the foods because we have a huge population of people that are poor. And we need to raise that bar. The same way America is talking about a minimum wage, we're talking about a minimum wage here, and it's high time that we did, because if we can unlock the door of poverty to some degree, people will begin to eat healthier, and people who are in business creating food will begin to see that they can create a market in their own backyard as opposed to importing everything that we walk and talk. You know, that covers it.
Yes, that's great. Thank you, David. I have a question for Heather. Unhealthy fast foods are readily accessible, and food security is a challenge in some Caribbean countries. How does the HCC, but I'm going to turn this on to the BCS, how does the Belize Cancer Society propose to stimulate the public and in turn legislators to invest more in agriculture and local manufacturing?
Well, one of the strategies the BCS, in collaboration with the HCC, has done is that we've intensified our advocacy efforts. We have ensured ourselves to align and collaborate with key organizations like the HCC, like the World Obesity Federation, and other organizations like UNESCO, the American Cancer Society. So through these collaborations, we're able to extend these educational initiatives that start to spark that thought in your head that, yes, obesity is a problem. So this is one of the initiatives that we use to advocate, and we educate people on the individual level, on the community level, and on the national and political level. So through these mediums, we're able to engage our policymakers who are logged on, we're able to engage our community leaders, we're able to engage our youth. And by us sharing these educational experiences and speaking with trained professionals like Mark and David and Dr. Alafia, by bringing this information together and coordinating our advocacy strategies or policy formulations or legislation's approach, these are the ways that we're able as a Caribbean community and as the BCS agitate for change in our respective areas. So right now we're partnering with the HCC to advocate for front of package labeling. So that is something that we are hoping to intensify our efforts in the next coming weeks. And this is one way that we're addressing obesity in our region, because if we can get the policies and legislations in place to address food security, to address our imports and our balances, we will be able to make some effect on obesity while educating our children from the ground up. We're bound to make a change.
Thank you, Heather. Alafia, two questions for you here. One is a simple, well, one is a question on the FOPL. Who is responsible for affixing the FOPL? And another one here is, has there been research into barriers to healthier lifestyles amongst persons of African descent?
So the first one, the front of package labeling, who is responsible? So in each local country, it's the National Bureau of Standards, but they have to have a national committee that has representatives from a number of sectors who have to agree. Now, apparently the rules are different in different countries, and I'm hoping that somebody else on the panel would be able to really expand this answer. I know, for example, in some countries, even if only industry objects and everybody else agrees, industry sort of has the veto power. And I don't know how that works everywhere, but I know that in some countries, this is what is happening. At the base of it, though, it's a political thing. Prime Minister Bachelet in Chile is the person who drove that thing through. And it takes a political commitment and political will to do it. So we just need to have the will to say to the manufacturers, this is how it's going to be, this is a law, and you have to comply. But you have to take a process to do that. Is there anybody else who can amplify my answer or make it better? Who knows more about this?
I mean, I can do that. The affixing of the actual labels, that specific question is related to, that's a national decision, as Alafia said. And in some instances, what we've learned from other countries is there are stickers which are applied by national actors who will do that. So whether that's in the import department, or in some instances, if the sticker is not applied domestically in countries where we are importing most of what we consume, the stickers are applied by the manufacturers to when they make the products, packaging. And so they know that for certain markets, they need to have certain stickers, and they affix those, or certain labels, and they affix the labels, or they design their labels for those markets. In the instance, for example, Uruguay, which is very similar to our setting in the Caribbean, where we import most of what we consume, and we have small markets that are highly unlikely to be able to have the scale to demand that the international manufacturers prepare labels for our markets, we can then affix stickers. And it's just a matter of deciding, once you get in country, who the onus falls on to affix those stickers. Sometimes it's retailers, and sometimes it's the actual distributors. And Alafia, sure, go ahead.
Add something just on that same subject. I think one of the other areas that we need to be thoughtful about is that, unfortunately, the products that we do produce in the Caribbean, a lot of them have too much sugar, too many additives. So while we're embracing the change and understanding the need for it, we've got to also embrace these small manufacturers who are, the bread and butter of a lot of our countries in terms of businesses, to look at the whole idea of reformulation. I know it's a word that Alafia likes to use a lot, and I think it needs to be sounded out a lot more, because we are also in danger of hurting small business that needs to grow and needs to change, needs to adapt, and we need to find ways to help them to get there. Maybe bigger organizations, bigger manufacturers are more in line to be able to do that, with food scientists and nutritionists who can help. But we need to be able to address that as a social issue, because it is a social issue.
So let me just also say a little bit in response to what David just said. You know, it was David who a couple months or whatever ago said to us, reality check. Listen, people, ultra processed foods is not going away. Okay? What we need to do is to try to help to reformulate, because people want to buy them and manufacturers want to sell them, and we're still in a free society. And so I've challenged David, because of his background, to actually help us. And that's what we are doing. He was talking about the meeting we had last week with this mass manufacturer of food, but really challenging David to help lead this reformulation component of our response. It's not the only component, but as he pointed out, we need to make sure that even the ultra processed foods are a little safer, because if you make a small change in something that goes to everybody, it probably has more impact than making a big change in something that goes to only a few. So we have to look at the population. What are they eating? And in general, are there any incremental changes we can make in that? I think there was a second question for me, which I've forgotten.
Yeah, the second question was on research into adopting or barriers to adopting healthier lifestyles amongst people of African descent.
Okay,
yeah,
so
we're tight on time, Alafia, so maybe try and limit the response to a quick response, and then we will start to think about wrapping up.
Okay. UWI is leading a number of projects that is looking at just this. They not specifically to people of African descent, because the challenges that we face are global. The marketing, the high sugar, the high fat, and all of that. So in brief, yes, we are looking at that. And to just add that the Ministry of Health in Jamaica has also recently added a research component of its budget. So that also is available.
Okay, thank you. So we have many questions that are unanswered, but we will do our best to answer these post the webinar. I'm going to ask all of the panelists to give us some summary closing remarks. Try to limit your remarks to just under a minute, and then we will have then we will close up the webinar. So let's start with Dr. Gunter, and then we can proceed in the order in which you presented.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just to say this was a really fascinating discussion, and I think it's something really important. And yeah, I mean, cancer is a growing issue in many countries of the world, and for many cancers, we don't really have very good ways of preventing them, but many of them are preventable. So we know that for many cancers, at least 50 to 60% of them could be prevented by changes in lifestyle and diet. But the question is how to do that. So it really requires a kind of collaboration between kind of public health specialists and governments and the industry to try to implement changes in the way people eat, in the way people live, and also ensuring that there is access to healthy whole foods. Because I mean, I think it's been said by a few times, David and some others, that in many countries and in many populations, it's not their fault that they're obese. It's because there's lack of affordable healthy foods. And some of that is because of pressures from industry. So I think there are countries, I mean, it's really great hearing that example from Chile, that they're trying to kind of overcome this and try to really tackle this issue. And I think there are many organizations around the world, and WHO are really making this a priority now on tackling NCDs and in particular ultra processed foods and accessibility to healthy food. So I think this is becoming much more prominent, but yeah, we obviously need more research and more implementation of that research to kind of tackle the obesity, and then obviously the link to cancer will follow. So, thank you for inviting me to this.
Thanks, Dr. Gunter. And Danielle?
So Maisha, if I may, I'm just going to pull a quote from that letter to the region on behalf of the pediatricians. And a line says, "We cannot afford to wait until things get back to normal and assume that our children and young people will emerge as resilient creatures, or that the damage caused to them during the pandemic can be undone. And we really must come together now." Thanks so much again.
Thanks, Danielle. And David?
I would like to see the regional private sectors pay for a chair at the University of the West Indies, to follow research into the use of cassava, breadfruit, sweet potato. I'm tired, I'm getting old, and I'm not even from the Caribbean, but truthfully, the nutritious benefits of those vegetables has yet to be unleashed, particularly breadfruit, which grows on a tree in the back of somebody's yard and has never been commercialized in the history of the Caribbean. It was poor man's food. It was brought here to feed slaves in the sugar industry. But it is a miraculous product with all kinds of opportunities. And Caribbean governments have talked about it. Regional people have talked about it. Oh, let's do it. Oh, let's do it. Oh, let's do it. But it's all talk. So we need the action. And we need people who are in private sector to see that there are profits that can come from highly nutritious foods. Well, A, feed the local population, and B, get the export drive that we can send something away from here that is not coals from Newcastle. In other words, we could be producing food in the Caribbean with what we grow. It could be a world market opportunity. Farmers could begin to grow it if they knew that was that opportunity, if they could be part of it. So I think the university, pushing it back to you, there should be a linkage there that says, hey, this is what you can do with these commodities. This is what you can do with these products. This is the science that speaks to the benefits of this food. We've heard it, we've read about it. It needs to be regularized into today's convenience food, product food that we want to pick up and use tonight in a quick manner. We've got to modernize what we are growing to meet the demands of our public who have little time.
Thank you, David. And Heather.
Well, I would like to leave and remind everybody that each and every one of us plays a very integral role in addressing obesity, cancer, and NCDs in our region. And I would like to invite you and prompt you to educate yourself. Become an advocate for change in your country. You do not have to be attached to an organization. Send a letter to your minister. Join one of the organizations that you see on here. See how you can play your part. But we need to have evidence-based policies and programs and legislation, and we're only able to do that through education. So educate, advocate, and push for change in your country as well as the rest of the region. And we know that poverty is a serious issue, but if we all support each other and we do this all of society approach that the WHO and everybody has been preaching about, if we link agriculture with economy and health and education, it's not just a territorial thing, then we'll be able to exchange ideas and exchange information as we're doing on this platform. We're able to agitate for change and ignite the passion in different people to make a change in their country. So I remind you, each and every one of you are advocates and you play a part, starting today.
Thank you, Heather. Well said. And Alafia.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with everything everyone has said. I just wanted to add the dimension of the food system and the connectivity within the food system. I think it's important, David alluded to it earlier, that, for example, people who are creating finished products need a backward link to the farmers so that they can say to the farmers, okay, I'll take 100 pounds of sweet potato from you every week. And I think that there needs to be more of a shared understanding of this problem, really in a kind of systematic way. What is the food system? What is the problem? What's causing the problem? What's causing the cause? What's the cause of the problem? And then to get some clear understanding as to the different strategies, because this is not a magic bullet situation. We need multiple strategies. I think that's the message, the final word I want to leave. Multiple strategies in multiple sectors, all aimed towards the same objective.
Thank you, Alafia. Well, it's been a wonderful presentation, a series of presentations, a wonderful panel discussion. And I'm going to hand over to Heather now to provide closing remarks. I would like to thank the panelists. I would like to thank the World Obesity Federation, and I'd like to thank the Belize Cancer Society for inviting the HCC to be part of this event. Heather, over to you.
Thanks, Maisha. In closing off the event, we would like to extend immense appreciation and gratitude for the World Obesity Federation, Ms. Winnie Dehaney, she's the head of events, Olivia Brata, the director of science and programs, Claudia Batts, policy coordinator, Kathy Hansen, events coordinator, We thank you for taking on this event and recognizing the importance of obesity and cancer and the sensitization for Caribbean region. We'd also like to express special thanks to our panelists and presenter, Ms. Maisha Hutton, Professor Lafa Samuel, David Neelands, Mark Gunther, and Danielle Wallen. Thank you so much for seeing this as a key integral initiative for our Caribbean region to get the information out there. Thank you as well to the ATC team, Mr. Ian Pitts, for always being there when we bug him, and to my BCS team for continuing to believe in the passion of education and getting the information out there to our people. We could not have this event without you. Tremendous thanks. And final thank you to all our participants in today's session. We're hoping that some topic or something pique your interest and arouse your passion that you will be able to fight for obesity and NCD prevention in your country. We wish you all a healthy, safe, and a happy day. Thank you for joining us.